Hello, techies. Welcome to the Tech Ties Africa podcast, where we'll bring you the latest stories on tech and startups in Africa. Catch us every Thursday at 10 a.m. WAT on techtiesafrica.podbean.com. Let us know what you think by giving us feedback in the comments or on our socials. Now, on with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tech Ties Africa podcast. As always, we talk about tech, we talk about startups and technology in Africa. This week, we have quite a couple of interesting topics. As always, there's some fintech, but we also have some court cases, have some new developments with open banking. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this episode. How are you doing, Karen?
Hi, Kelvin. I'm enjoying the calm of Nakuru. Lots of rain, but a lot of calm. And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. I think we're seeing a reckoning in African technology. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you and obviously continuing that conversation with our listeners. Yeah.
All right, so let's get into it, starting with Paystack. So Paystack has been in the news a lot recently. First of all, they launched this new product called Zap by Paystack. It's meant to be a peer-to-peer transfer application that promises speed when you want to transfer money from one point to another, one account to another. And they have been fined by the CBN 250 million naira because the CBN says they don't have the appropriate license for this. I was shocked because I'm like, surely a startup, a company at this point, I think they have gone beyond the startup phase. A company like Paystack, as big as Paystack, I didn't expect that this would be an issue. Surely they have like enough legal personnel that would make sure that this doesn't happen. But apparently that's the case. And at the moment, they are talking with the CBN and trying to resolve this issue. But this is quite surprising for me.
Yeah, I'm also shocked because having been acquired by a global company, Stripe, you expect that their internal procedures are very clear and they're able to catch these things, and their legal team should be robust enough to make sure that they are well protected. But I think this signals a trend that we are seeing in Africa, and we have talked about it severally, and that is regulation is becoming an important thing in the tech space because of the rate at which growth is happening. Governments are realizing that they have to run for the regulations to meet the level at which innovation is taking place. And we are seeing an enforcement of stricter rules on digital payment solutions. And I think it's important for these regulations to be there to protect users because we have seen fintechs abusing users in a lot of ways. And when you're a fintech, you need to ensure that you have all the right licenses. And some of these licenses ensures that your anti-money laundering frameworks are in place, your know your customer frameworks are in place, ID verification is happening, screening is happening, fraud alerts are happening, which ensures that your users are protected. So I'm really, on one side, shocked, but on the other side, really impressed with the governance that regulations are being enforced. You're not just having regulations for the sake of regulations, but you're having regulations that are being enforced. And I think this is a clear wake-up call to startups in the fintech space to ensure that their frameworks are working, to ensure that their licenses are in place, to ensure that they have the right legal expertise within their teams so that they are in right standing with the government, because regulations are starting to become very key in the tech and startup world in almost all African countries, especially the ones that are leaders in these spaces. So yeah, that's what I would say. If you're a startup founder or you're a tech owner and you're listening to us, it's time to make sure that you're putting in place compliance departments or experts that are ensuring that every step you're taking is properly covered when it comes to regulations.
Yeah, regulations are very important to protect the customer. So it's good to see that the CBN in this case is paying attention to fintechs in general. I think there have been a lot of scrutiny with the fintech, especially because fintech is growing so rapidly and it's quite hard to keep up, even just as a consumer, not to talk of as a regulator. But they are doing their best to keep up with this. I saw a comment somewhere, or I guess it's a thought process that started picking up steam on social media where people were saying the CBN representatives are only angry that Paystack did the launch without inviting them for the launch. I don't know whether that holds any water in this case. But yeah, they clarified that Paystack has a switching and processing license, which allows them to move money from one account to another, but they need a microfinance or banking license to actually hold money. And the issue is because the ZAP product has a wallet feature which essentially holds money. So you need a microfinance and banking license for that. I'm guessing because Paystack, I believe they also have a microfinance bank called Paystack Titan, and maybe they thought they could operate on that license. This is just speculation from me, but yeah, I guess there are some things that need to be resolved.
Yeah, and I think that this license, especially when you're a funds holding organization, there's some licenses that are very key for the consumer, because when you're holding funds for clients, you're supposed to have certain reserves just to ensure that customers are protected in case your organization goes down, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And when you're sitting outside as a consumer, not understanding that some of these frameworks have been put in place and some of these licenses are put in place to ensure that organizations are playing by the rules to protect you in case of anything. So I I see where the drama is coming from. Trust Nigerians, but I think that some of these regulations are very key as we move forward, and it's also key to set an example so that other organizations understand that these are regulations you cannot play around with.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, moving forward, Nigeria seems to be on a roll when it comes to fining and suing people. The Nigerian
We need the money. We need the money.
The Nigerian tribunal has upheld a 220 million fine against Meta for violating consumer laws. While I was doing my research, I realized that the accusation is that Meta has been appropriating the data of Nigerian users on its platforms without consent from the users. It has abused its market dominance by forcing exploitative privacy policies on users, and has been discriminatory and disparate in its treatment of Nigerians compared with other jurisdictions that have the same regulations. So, from my understanding, is that the way Meta is running its business in Nigeria is contrary to the regulations that are in place for data protection within the country. And the government is not joking around.
Yeah. I mean, Meta especially, they seem to be in a lot of these cases around the world. I know there are some that are going on in Europe at the moment, some in the US, and I think somewhere in Asia as well. But as we have talked about in recent times, especially in Africa, there's a lot more thought and scrutiny as well in data protection and data privacy that's currently going on across Africa. And so the regulators are now paying attention to what these global companies are doing with our data. And of course, you know that a lot of these products, like from Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and co, are free. So the way they make a lot of their money is through advertising. And for them to advertise, they have to give some user data to the advertiser. So the way they go about doing this, in some cases, abuse the data laws. For example, the allegation is that they do not allow users to give proper consent in their privacy policy and things like that. So in a way, it's good that some scrutiny is coming against Meta from Africa. Surely, if they keep having cases around the world, then there is definitely something to look into. So it's good that the regulator is looking into that.
Yeah, 100%. And this is Africa's biggest fine against a foreign tech company. So it could be setting a precedent when it comes to data regulations and foreign accountability for other countries in the continent. And I think it's an important message that is being sent out that you may be international, but you have to abide by the rules that you find in our countries. And when this is done from the standpoint of protecting the citizens, then it is a good precedent to set. And I think it is an important precedent to set because the more we are expanding our digital landscape as a continent, the more there is space and room for our rights to be violated. And if we are not careful to set up regulations that protect us, but not just set them up, but also enforce them, then we may face issues in the future when it comes to our data privacy. So I'm really excited that this is a precedent that is being set, and I'm sure that Nigeria being one of the pace setters in the continent, we will see this start to be seen across the continent where we are actually protecting our citizens from some of these violations that have gone unanswered before.
Yeah, Nigeria definitely seems to be very serious about this case in particular. And Meta made an interesting play actually in response to this. Of course, they are fighting it in the tribunal. But what I saw some time ago was a couple of media publications circulating that WhatsApp may be exiting Nigeria if this case is upheld. I found that an interesting play because that seems to be that they want the citizens to respond in favor of WhatsApp and put some pressure on the regulator to back down a bit. In terms of conversations I've seen about it in Nigeria, people are talking about it, but they are not really incensed to the point that they would want to defend WhatsApp. A lot of the conversation is okay, the regulators are just looking for money and all of that. I don't think that's it in this case because, like I said, Meta has a lot of cases around the world. But the other conversation that came to my mind, especially with this particular topic, was last week we talked about Aproco Doctors startup, and they are pretty much building this chatbot that's supposed to operate on WhatsApp. And then I'm connecting it with this current case that Meta is threatening that they could leave Nigeria. And I mean, if you build your entire startup on WhatsApp and then WhatsApp leaves Nigeria, that's pretty much the end of the startup, right? We saw this, I believe, last year with another company in Kenya, PrivPay, that built their entire startup on M-Pesa's API. They wanted to give privacy to users that wanted to send money anonymously. When they started to gain some significant traction, M-Pesa cut the access to their API. And that was just the end of the startup. So I don't think you can build every possible infrastructure that your startup needs to survive. You still have to depend on certain APIs to an extent, but not on a platform that immediately maybe there's an issue with your relationship with that platform, then your startup just falls. I am worried about that.
That's a really cool observation. I'll link it to something we talk about in content strategy. When you're building content, one of the things that we advise our clients is you can build your asset on social media, for example, on Instagram. You can also build it on YouTube, but you have to understand that you're building it on someone else's platform and they can shut it down anytime. So you have to have an asset where you have control. And that is why email lists become such an important thing. Your website becomes such an important thing, because these are things you have control over, right? So even if Instagram, let's say, decides you have violated something, which seems to happen a lot. Yesterday, I was opening my Pinterest and I realized one of my accounts was closed. I wasn't even notified. Apparently, it went against certain regulations. I do not know what regulations they were. They did not communicate that to me. They just shut down the entire channel. Just like that, any users or followers that I had accumulated were gone. Now, if you do not have an asset where you have control, that becomes a complete loss. And I think what you're saying is very important. As you are innovating, you need to have certain aspects or assets within your business that you have full control over, so that where external forces come in, they will not completely shut you down. Like what you're saying with Aproko Doctor. As much as he's building the chatbot on WhatsApp, how can he ensure that he is collecting data or something of the sort where he has some level of control beyond what WhatsApp has?
Yeah. And I hope they do think about this, because it could be the end of the startup before it even begins. So I believe they would be paying attention to this, and to anyone that's building something out there, this is something to think about. Moving forward, we finally get open banking in Nigeria. It's been in the works for about 4 years, and I know there have been a lot of conversations around open banking, especially at tech events that I have attended. And Nigeria has approved the launch of open banking starting in August of this year. The essential goal of open banking is to give financial institutions the ability to share customer data securely among themselves. Of course, this opens up a couple of possibilities for fintechs. I see that Nigeria is the first to do it in Africa. So, yeah, it's a very important framework, and I believe we would see a number of innovations come from this once it starts to take full effect.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, it's very good for innovation, it's very good for fintechs. On the other hand, it is a very good opening for data misappropriation, right? We've seen a few court cases happening already in Kenya. While it creates the capacity for personalized financial services, for better credit scoring, probably better access to loans and financial facilities and things like those, there's also the opening for people's data to be abused. And I think one of the biggest issues that I normally have is that when these things are created, the level of education that is offered to people is not enough, because a lot of people will consent to their data being used without understanding what they're consenting to. And that is a big issue. So user education is such an important integral thing when it comes to implementing these kinds of laws or these kinds of frameworks. And I don't think it happens the right way, not just in Africa, across the world. A lot of people consent to things without understanding what it is they're consenting to and why they're doing it, because they do not have the literacy for it. I think it's a great move in a good direction, but I think that user education is going to be key, but I don't think it will happen. That's my opinion.
Yeah, you do raise a very solid point there with the education of these new policies. And I mean, you want to use any service, and then they put this long privacy policy or terms and conditions agreement document that seems very hectic to go through. And I think sometimes it is deliberate from a lot of these companies to make it as difficult as possible to go through those documents, so that most people get discouraged and just agree. So maybe we are at that point where we need to, I mean, this is maybe not a short-term thing, but maybe there should be a more user-friendly way to present privacy policies and terms and conditions and things like that. I don't know whether you can do that, but maybe something to think about, right? But then with open banking itself, yes, it does open access to all of these personalized services that will be quite useful. But I believe there has been some thoughts to this policy because it has been in the works for a while. I'm sure there has been some back and forth, and eventually there is now some agreement between the stakeholders involved that, okay, this would work for everybody. Because from what I read, initially the CBN wanted a lot of control as to how this should be implemented, but the banks pushed back a bit on having more say into how this can be implemented. So there has been a lot of back and forth. So I like to think, maybe it's just me being optimistic, but I like to think that they have thought about the exploitative side, because we would see the bad actors try to misuse this. And I do hope that there are safeguards for that.
I agree. Let's see how it goes. I think it will be, again, a template for other countries to observe and go through. Now we're seeing, still in fintech, stable coins. We're back to stable coins again. Mastercard has unveiled an end-to-end capability to power stablecoin transactions from wallets to checkouts, which is really interesting because there have been increasing global regulation clarities when it comes to the stablecoin. We have seen in Africa, Nigeria and Kenya a race towards creating some of these digital currencies, and as that is happening, we are now seeing that it's being backed up by global organizations. They are trying to create essential solutions that bring efficiency, and you can make payments, you can remit funds, you can disburse money using stable coins. So there's great potential here, I think, for people who are in the cryptocurrency space to start seeing this becoming not just a tool for a few people, but something that is used by the masses.
I believe one of the things that I found interesting with this story is that, well, MasterCard is involved. And we all know about MasterCard. A lot of the cards, debit cards, credit cards we use are made by MasterCard. And they are now seeing the potential in stable coins. And I believe they have been doing it across the world in a lot of different markets gradually. But one of the things that caught my attention with this particular announcement was the partnership with OKX. The OKX is a company that is based in Seychelles, which is in Africa, that's already a large crypto exchange in terms of trading volume. So when I saw it, I thought that, okay, we are going to see a situation where you can now use your same MasterCards to pay through cryptocurrencies, or maybe it opens up services where you can also send money from USDC or any other stablecoin to your local currency. So that would be very interesting, because on this podcast we talk about cross-border payments a lot. So how does this play into that? How does this increase the access to finance across Africa? How does it ease sending money from one African country to another? And yeah, I'm quite interested in how this develops over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me as a freelancer and also as someone who plays in the gig economy and remote workers, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this influences the way that I receive funds and the way that I save. So it's a very interesting time to be alive.
That's one way to put it. All right. Moving on, Nigeria partners UK to combat cross-border cybercrime between both countries. The Nigerian police force, I think, and the United Kingdom have signed an agreement to work together to combine the growing threat of cybercrime. And I mean, cyber security and cybercrime is one of the things we have talked about on an ongoing basis on the podcast. So I thought to bring this one to the conversation. I mean, it's good to see this partnership happen. I know we have talked about this on the podcast. How do we develop maybe cybersecurity startups, communities, talent, and things like that? But at the end of the day, you also need the government to be thinking in this direction as well. And it's good to see that they are thinking on that level as well.
Yeah, I remember in one of the podcasts I said that we need a team of people who are sitting down and strategizing the same way that cyber criminals are sitting down and strategizing. They're also strategizing. They're trying to see where is cybercrime going and how can we combat it before it becomes an issue. So I think this is a positive move. We know that Nigeria has a bad reputation when it comes to cybercrime. Kenya has a bad reputation as well when it comes to cybercrime. So I think this is a really good move in the right direction where we have experts sitting down, observing what is happening within the cyberspace, observing the trends that are happening within cybercrime, and combating that before it becomes a problem. So it's a sign that international data flows and fintech services are going to face new oversight layers. And I think as a globe, we need to come together to fix cybercrime because it happens across borders. It's something that can be instigated from one country and affect a completely different continent. So there needs to be that togetherness when it comes to combating cybercrime.
Yeah, I agree with you. It has to be a group effort in the actual sense of everyone in the group contributing, not like when we were in university and secondary school, where one person is doing all of the work and the rest of the teammates are not doing anything. Yeah, everybody needs to work together on this because of the interconnected nature of where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're looking at cross border. It's one of the things that we're seeing will be affected by stablecoin. And Bank, I hope I'm saying that right, has announced a specialized training for Africa's continental free trade area. So the Africa Export Import Bank is designed to equip enterprises with an understanding of the agreement's commercial implications and its transformative potential. I think as African businesses, it's important for us to understand the different tariffs, the different regulations that come in for exporters in different trading areas or regions. And so I find that this is going to be a really great training. It's taking place in Abuja, Nigeria. I think today has just been about Nigeria. On June, from June to July, the 30th of June to the 2nd of July. And it will provide practical policy insights into this trade area's evolving regulations and the landscape. And I think it's amazing because as businesses, whether it's e-commerce or even fintech, especially people who are involved in exporting, this is going to be such an important training for insights on how to do it better.
Yeah. If you're interested in doing business and trade between African countries, this is a very important training. I also think the African Continental Free Trade Area, this policy that's meant to make it easier to trade within Africa, and a couple of African countries have started to come on board with this. We also did write an article on this. So if you really want to know more, I would leave the link in the description. But yeah, it's supposed to make it easier to trade within Africa. Hopefully, more people that are thinking about building businesses, building startups that you want to operate within Africa that have to do with trade. So imports, exports, like Karen has said, this would be a very important training. So you should check it out.
Yeah, I also think it's important for one of the industries that we keep saying has a problem, logistics.
Yeah, logistics. Logistics is something we can talk about all day and still not get anywhere with it. So, yes, it is important.
This is a good training for you. I think it will help you understand how to maneuver the fragmented market that is Africa.
Yeah. Hopefully, with this policy as well, somewhere down the line, we start to reduce these fragments and make it a lot easier to do business within Africa. But I mean, it's Africa. We tend to make things hard sometimes. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
All right. That's all for this episode of the Tech Tides Africa podcast. Thank you for joining us. Leave your thoughts on some of these topics in the comments, and we would see you same place, same time next week. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Tech Tides Africa podcast. Remember, leave a comment or share with your friends. We'll see you next Thursday at the same time and place you get your podcast. Until then, stay well.